Good afternoon, everybody. We're back for our February town hall. Thank you all for jumping on.
Thanks for being here, everybody. It's good to see you, Jim, and Janice with her on camera. She is in Arizona this week, and I'm in Springfield, Missouri, and Jim coming at us again from Florida. So happy everybody can get on the call. Isn't this kind of a cool thing, being able to meet from all over the place, just to be able to talk safety and a mindset for drivers and all that kind of thing, no matter where we are. We live in a very different age than we ever have before, right?
No, it's definitely fantastic, and we appreciate everybody jumping on and listening to the conversations and engaging. So it's a great part of what we're doing. So as Brandon alluded to, I am Jim Worsdale. I am going to be the master of ceremonies today to kind of guide the conversation. So we're excited to kind of get started. So feel free to unmute your mic, have questions. This is more of a forum. We want to make sure we're having conversations and we're allowed, we're here to answer your questions along the way. Even if it's not related to the topic, we'd like to hear from you. So,
well, and this topic, Jim, this topic, what drivers wish they knew. There's a lot of things about this. As a driver, you kind of wish you knew something from time to time, but also as a company, how do we actually get drivers ready for some of the other things that they'll be doing, the shipping and what to expect in certain situations, and I think that's a Jim's here to keep me on track, because this can go many different directions. So we're always happy to hear from you guys.
Well, as bad as the weather has been in the Midwest and the Northeast, I mean, what sort of things that you wish your drivers knew in emergency situations? I mean, upstate New York and greater part of New England is getting over 3 feet of snow through the weekend with that blizzard, or bomb cyclone is kind of the new term when you're talking about blizzards now. So I'm just not used to saying that. I'm an old school blizzard guy when you're talking about that. But
my very first trip as a truck driver, Jim, I'll tell this story real quick. It was literally my first trip as a truck driver. I went to driving school back in 1992 and got my CDL, and it was about November or so. And I went to work at my first company, and they said, hey, listen, we know you're new at all of this. Went out for the 3 weeks with my trainer, and I was ready. I had my truck. It was right there. It was a 1988 Freightliner cabover. It was my very first truck that I ever drove.
That's awesome.
And yeah. And so they said, hey, we're gonna try to keep you south a little bit here. We've got this run from Houston, Texas over to Ocala, Florida, and we'll kind of keep you on that. And I said, okay, that'll be great until I get my legs underneath me and all of this. And I went up to my dispatcher. I was really proud. This is my first time going out as a truck driver. And I said, okay, guess I need to pick up. I was acting all big time trucker here, and said, yeah, I guess I need to pick up an empty and head down to Houston to get on that Houston Ocala run. And they said, what, are you crazy? That goes to owner operators, man. That's a cherry run. That's not going to some brand new guy. We've got this thing for you that goes to Hunts Point, New York City. My very first trip. For you guys that haven't, that are old timers in the game like I am. Hunts Point was the largest grocery store warehouse in the United States back then, and it was also one of the most dangerous places you could go as a truck driver. To make the story even better, this is also before no cell phones, I didn't have, any kind of communications, no satellite communications or anything. This was, carrying a paper log, and you call in with a calling card at a truck stop where you'd go and sit down, and they'd have a phone at every booth, and that's how you called anybody. So I took off, and I ran into a lake effect snowstorm in Pennsylvania that dumped about 18 inches of snow on the ground while I was on the road. This is seriously my first look at being a truck driver. Was a trip into one of the weirdest places to go as a driver, and also in some of the worst kind of weather you could possibly experience as a driver. Anyway, my story, and I'm sure others have some that are like it, but
no, that's a great first story. Everybody always has quirks on their first drive. you're bringing me back to yesteryear, getting into the Freightliner cab over. Man, what a truck that was! Holy cow! We had when we started the business. My dad was in transportation for 30 years before we started the business. We had a bunch of 92 and 93 cab overs, and those things were gems. I mean, they were different to work underneath that maintenance wise, and to have
Yeah,
that
flip the cab up and
flip the
right.
cab up, and that bed was right behind the driver, and there wasn't much to it. You weren't sleeping. Those weren't comfy confines, that's for sure. So
No, no, sir. There was a lot
so
of nights across the doghouse. Is what we you'll lay across the doghouse and grab a short rest and everything. But it was a different time back then. I don't know. There's a lot of truck drivers anymore that even can experience what driving a cab over was like, and it's kind of an interesting thing, right?
no, it's I'm glad I was part of that time. That gives me a perspective on things to be able to talk about that, because it's a different things are a lot more comfortable than they were back then. So
Yeah,
so
it sure is.
um so you are a veteran leader in this transportation world, been 35 years, million mile safe driver. Tell them a little bit about you.
Well,
you
thanks,
know
Jim. Yeah, so
yeah.
as Jim said, I started out, and from my first story, I started out as an over-the-road truck driver. Did that for 3 years. Moved into a role as a road trainer. This is where we would bring in new drivers from CDL school and have them ride with a veteran driver. I was very young when that happened too. So my first role as a trainer, as a road trainer, I was 24 years old, and did that for about a year or two. I moved to another company, which was more of a regional dispatch. But we were talked about weather again. Uh, when you move into that kind of a system where you bid runs, my my runs through my 17-year career at that one company, we ran teams, and my career was wintertime I was in the northern Midwest, and in summertime I was in Texas and Louisiana and all of the hot states. So it was interesting. I remember one time I was up in International Falls, Minnesota in the wintertime, and it was 60 degrees below zero, and we didn't know what to expect. We were up there, and it was all hand unload that freight and get it in the warehouses for the drivers and everything. But really great experiences in all of that. I moved from there into a trucking school as a CDL trainer, an entry level driver trainer, and then moved into an assistant program director position there. After leaving the college, I was also a CDL examiner at that school. We were one of the only third-party testing facilities in the state that would test outside equipment. In other words, in the state of Missouri, as a CDL examiner for third-party CDLs back in that at that time, you can only test your people. So if you were a company that was training your own drivers to get their CDL, you could test them, but you couldn't test any outside people that were just bringing their truck in. What was interesting about that is you get to learn a lot about just different vehicles and what they all look like, how they all drive, how you need to test somebody in a piece of equipment that's different from anything you've seen before. This is Southwest Missouri, so we saw a lot of handmade trailers that didn't have a stamp on them or anything, and we had to look at the size of the axles to determine what the GVWR was on the truck. You've got
Wow.
5,000-pound axles, you've got 10,000-pound axles, and you had to kind of gauge that just to determine if that was a CDL vehicle or not. But at Keller, I have worked with you in the driver training space and principles of defensive driving, entry level driver training, yard driver, forklift operation, all of these things that we do. And now I'm the operations manager for our consulting team, and help them with some projects like CTRE, the Certified Transportation Regulatory Expert training. So happy to be here. Thanks. I know that's kind of a long-winded talk about who I am, but I am always happy to be on this call with you and our guests, and look forward to hearing from them a little bit, what they're doing.
Yeah, Janice, can you check to see if the mics are open? I don't know if the capabilities are
Okay,
working?
yeah, it looks like it is, but I
Okay,
will double check the settings here.
okay, thanks. Yeah, but look, sounds like Bob I'd love to hear from Bob. Well, while we're doing that, I'll introduce myself.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so
I
uh,
took that space a lot, but you've got a lot of experience in this as well.
yeah, so I am Jim Worsdale. I'm out of the Tampa, Florida area. I've been with Keller. This will be my 7th year. Brandon and I have worked together from the beginning and in the training services space, the driver training world. We spent a lot of time together, working through, talking through programs, talking through scenarios like this, sharing stories. So we're excited to be with you all today to talk about this. So I am going to flip the page. And we've got a bunch of leaders on this call, Brandon, a bunch of people that are involved in operations, a bunch of people that, spend the day to day. So as a leader, as somebody that is, looking to give rules to their team, set their team up with success with processes. What do we wish new drivers understood when they come into this new world? Whether it's a new driver, new to a CDL, new to your fleet, what sort of things are we looking for in this space?
So I'll tell you the number one, if I was thinking of one answer to, what is it that drivers that you wish you knew your drivers knew about these things? It's not the what, it's the how am I going to apply it? We can teach an awful lot of things by sitting somebody in front of a screen and saying, okay, learn all of the things. But then if we don't take it to that next level, sometimes we don't know how quickly that recall is going to be. When you think about, knowing something academically and being able to answer multiple choice tests and true false questions and everything, yes, we have to have that because you have to know that they know what it is that they're supposed to know. Regulatory, by all means, definitely. But it is really interesting sometimes whenever we hear back from drivers that, hey, what I heard on the radio was this about the regulations, but they don't know how to look it up in the green book, or they don't know how to ask the right questions. This is also something that we wish, and I know in my role in the transportation and safety management and everything, was that I wish that dispatchers, that driver managers, that safety personnel knew more about how to actually discern whether what they were hearing from their drivers is actually regulatory, is actually something that is in the regulations. And I'll give a case in point. There's a lot of times we will look at the first sentence in a regulation and we'll say, okay, do I need to, for example, do I need to road test my driver? But we never really look at the second and third thing and the exceptions and the guidance and all of the other things that are around the regulations. It is really something that I think that all drivers should know, not only how to follow the regulations or what the regulations are, but then how are they going to apply them and how will they work, especially in a crisis moment. When we think about all of the stuff that's going on around us at all times, and we go back to something and say, this is the truth of what I have to do next. But we don't really know how it's going to work in that situation because there's so many variables. So knowing that deeper dive into regulations, deeper dive into how are we going to actually apply even the mission of the company, the safety mission of the company. Hey, boss, this ain't working. They're telling me I got to move my truck right now. What are my regulatory answers here? And then how do I do that? Or do I have to just start driving again? And suddenly the ELD pops off and we've got a lot of, edits that we have to make when sometimes it can be very simply solved just by knowing how these things are going to work in real time in the real world. So I would say that number one answer with this thing is not the what. It's going to be the how do I apply this? How does this pertain to me? Am I exempt even in certain situations? And there's a lot of times we kind of move through this space just hoping nothing happens, because if something happens, that's when we really find out if we know that we are covered by the regs or not. Does that make sense?
Of course it does. I think a lot of times in our world, and we're going to different clients every single week, and we're teaching them different parts of the regulation, whether it may be, ELD, whether it may be ELDT, whatever that process is. But we also talk to the the drivers or trainers that we're working with, and we're talking to them about on a high level, saying, hey, your regulation might be this, but make sure you understand what your company policy, because your company policy might be over here. So don't adhere to, make sure you're following your company's process and policy first, and the regulation, it may be double what's expected for you on the regulation. So make sure you understand that as well. So there's some mixed signals here when you got regulations over here and the company's policies and processes over here. There can be a lot of confusion when it comes to that.
It's funny, there's a lot of safety managers, even they'll have their weekly huddles or their quarterly huddles or something like this. And I've talked to several of these, and it's like, yeah, if they know too much, they're going to argue with you about how, well, all I have to do is this, boss, because that's what the regulations say. Yeah, except that it also says that you need to follow company policy as long as it doesn't go against what the regulations say. It can be in excess of, but it can't ever be against what those regulations are. Same way with state, intrastate, interstate regulations, knowing the difference between the two when they apply, and how the federal regulations work in your state with your state regulations as well. It's incredibly important to know. I think it's always funny when I talk about this with safety managers, and it's kind of like, yeah, we're talking regulations this time around, and I know I'm going to get a bunch of people with their green books in their laps. Probably the first time they've opened the thing, but they're gonna look in there and argue with us about our company policy. And you have to know, if you are a safety professional or if you are a manager in your role in transportation, knowing that book is incredibly important so that you can then answer the question. You can say, yes, this is what the regulation says. Here's what the guidance is around it. Here's how we apply the rule. This is where we apply certain exceptions to the rule. This is where we follow guidance. And those are really important things for safety professionals to know, I think, in the industry.
I totally agree. And Bob said in the chat, it depends on the trainer or the coach. I agree with him on that, because if you have a coach that's approachable, that can have those conversations, whether you're a trainer, whether you're a leader, whether you're a safety professional, whatever it may be, if you can cue them up on that, maybe they just have a bad interpretation of the rule. Maybe they're interpreting this as interstate and it really should be intrastate, and or vice versa, or how that works. So I think that's the important part of it, is you're a coach and you're not pointing at them when they get something wrong. You're saying, oh, listen, I understand where you could slip up with this, but this is really the interpretation of the rule. I think that's the important part of that, is making sure that you have a respectful approach when it comes to that, when you're having these conversations.
It's an interesting thing you brought up. I know I brought it up as well, intrastate and interstate, and how many people interpret the regulation as, well, I didn't drive across the state line, so I am under the intrastate regulations. This isn't true. Intrastate and interstate apply to interstate commerce. Even if you don't cross state lines with the truck, if you are receiving something that is designed for interstate commerce and you deliver that in state, you are involved in interstate trucking. So you're under the interstate regulations. A lot of people don't know that, and they kind of go, what? You're kidding me. I never crossed state lines, so I should be under all of this intrastate exceptions. Not so much. You're hauling freight that came from another state that was bound to another location, and you are now taking it from this to this. But the end point of that thing said Indianapolis to Anderson, Missouri, and I'm in Neosho, and I carry it on to Anderson. Guess what, guys? If that doesn't get if you don't get new shipping papers and everything changing that from interstate to intrastate, if your driver is on the intrastate exceptions, then them not knowing that they are actually falling under interstate commerce. I mean, what if they were non-accepted intrastate designation on their CDL, and now they're hauling that load for 20, 30, 40 miles? They are in violation of the intrastate commerce regs. It's interesting, right? Where we sometimes don't look at that kind of stuff.
Yes, it is a lot, and if you don't know how to interpret it, I used to carry around the little green book for years, but for those of you, and just if you can get the big green book has all the interpretations in it, and it has all the information in it. It'll give you every single interpretation for every single rule that's out there. So it's pretty good stuff. If I didn't realize that until I got the big book, and the big book has all the information in it. So
Absolutely.
we'd like to hear from you all. What sort of things do we wish drivers understood? You're dispatching, or you're working with drivers on a regular basis, having communications with them. Feel free to open up your mics. Is there anything, that you wish that your drivers knew?
We have Google nowadays for those lazy folks. And let me tell you something. I have seen people use Google to their folly before, because if you think that AI is going to save you on all of this kind of stuff, AI is going to spit out an answer. It doesn't necessarily mean that you know how to apply it and what the other things are. But you're right. If we do need to look something up quickly, if we need to find a regulation, I would say that even if you're using Google or AI tools or something like that, if you're just trusting them and moving on down the line, then you are trusting something that's not very well vetted a lot of times. We can go on and ask Google any kind of a regulation right now, and I can find at least a half a dozen different variations on this thing, and maybe it wouldn't even apply to my situation. But I do appreciate that. I use Google quite a bit to answer questions, but what I don't do is I don't trust it just on high. I say, okay, that's great, Google. What about this, or what about this? So knowing how to ask a question around a question is sometimes the best way to do that.
Nope.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. What are you guys, and I think, Jim, the question is, what do you wish your drivers knew, or what do you wish your drivers knew better, or were prepared for when they go out there? And what are some of the situations that our audience is having right now where, wow, you mean you didn't know that, and it actually turns into a problem? Because I think this is where we find that a lot of times, is where, well, hey man, I didn't know. And it's like, oh wow, now we have a huge amount of problems because a driver comes back or somebody comes back and says, man, I didn't even know that.
Well, that's bring up a great point. Preparation is the key. You could be not prepared because it's cold outside and forget a jacket. If you're going on a trip from Appleton, Wisconsin to Los Angeles, California, you got to know every road that you're going across. You got to know what path, what's the safest path, where the no truck routes are, how that works. What sort of time limit do you have? Where you're gonna stop along the beaten path? Where could you get delays? What happens? How this works? There's so many things. I know that could go wrong in the process. And what sort of things are you prepared for? I think preparation is the key when it comes to this trip planning.
I use Google Maps all the time now, and kind of the dust is collecting on my trucker's atlas, one of my trucker's atlases and everything. But I am so happy that I was able to be a truck driver in that day and age where we had a Rand McNally trucker's atlas. No plug for that company, but that was the one we used. And Rand McNally trucker's atlas and an address, and we knew what mile markers meant. We knew how to look for exits. We knew how to prepare ourselves for things that are coming up. And I think that some of that has lost its way just a little bit. I would wonder if truck drivers that never grew up using those kind of things really can navigate without it. How do we navigate the roadways right now without having something that tells us when to turn, where to turn, how to turn, and all of those things?
It can really make drivers complacent, because that's all they do is typing in the address. And we've all seen them now. I know a lot of the fleets have them, whether it's on the onboard technology or whatever it may be, but they have a trucker's GPS that gives you the trucker's route every single time. If you're going from point A to point B, it takes you around the route that you need to be able to take. So it's the easy button, right? It's the old easy button that you hit. Oh, I got it. I can get there. But do you really know the route? Are you just, how are you going about that? So on the trip planning side of things, preparation is the key. What would you do, Brandon? Give me some ideas when you were trip planning and you had an atlas. It was you and the atlas at that point. What sort of
Well,
things would you do to prep for
I
that?
think I think Bob says it all. You'd have your route and you'd map it out and you'd write it down and you'd have a notebook paper over here that would tell you where the turns are and what's going on. You knew how to read an atlas. You knew how to read that the black numbers, they meant something. The red numbers were defining two places there. You'd know how to read where exits actually happen. Texas was the worst, to be honest with you guys, because Texas has all of those side roads that, oh, hey, I missed my turn there and I'm not going to catch another one for miles ahead, and then I'm going to have to do a big swing around. So you'd learned how to pay a lot closer attention to that. Finding yourself on routes that even though they were marked as a truck route, they really weren't designed for trucks. I live in Missouri, but I live right on the border of Missouri, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. And if you ever look at a trucker's atlas of Arkansas, everything is designated for trucks, and you can get off on some very weird, we call them goat trails down here. You can get off some very weird goat trails just because they were assigned for trucks. Doesn't mean you necessarily want to go down it, and you can find an alternate route that way. I would say that for now, I would want to know a bit better how to prepare myself. We do an exercise a lot of times in our Principles of Defensive Driving class and entry-level driver training where what we ask is the question about, are you prepared for entering a situation like a city? And the example is this: you've got Denton, Texas, which is just north of Dallas, and there is a truck stop right there. And if you carry on for about another hour and a half, you are in the heart of the city right now. So the exercise is it's 4 o'clock in the morning and you've just come down from a trip from Tulsa, Oklahoma City or something like that. Do you pull off at the truck stop to use the restroom to make sure that you're prepared for now entering rush hour traffic? Reason is that if you're not prepared for that, suddenly you become a very dangerous driver that has to use the restroom so bad, but has no place to be able to pull over safely and be able to use the restroom. So it's not necessarily so much, can I make the trip on time, or can I get there to my destination, or do I know the route? It's, am I really preparing myself for whatever traffic conditions I could be facing? And I think a lot of times what happens is we find ourselves just in it and we just get through it instead of saying, okay, I know what I'm about to do. I'm prepared for it. Now I can go ahead and accomplish the rest of the trip.
Well, it's a great call out, Brandon. Bob, did you have anything you wanted to add? It looks like your mic is on.
Yeah, hey guys, can you hear me?
Hey, Bob.
Yes. Hey, Bob.
Hey fellows, what's going on? So hey, I just wanted to say, great storylines here. And I kind of go back with you along those ways. So I kind of climbed in a truck back in the early '80s, and back in the old days, it was fun. We had a lot of trucking shows on TV, as I'm sure I'm bringing back some memories for you. BJ
Yes,
and the
sir.
Bear. BJ and the Bear, the guy rode around the country with a monkey in his truck, chasing hot women, and like, what a gig, So, and the sad part was, as later later on through life, uh, I look back at that. I'm like, you know what? You never seen the guy do a logbook. I'm like, how in the hell did he get away with that? So, anyways,
Hollywood didn't know about log books. That was for us to know. But you're talking about a time even before the CDL program. So before the CDL program, there was an awful lot that was kind of just hey, if you get the trip done, if you're safe and you don't have an accident or anything, we're gonna look at it and we're gonna get you on the next run as long as you can do it. Those times have changed, Bob, right? I mean, those times we have to be a lot more careful and protective of our company and our reputation and even our driver's licenses.
Exactly. I mean, and I even, so yeah, I mean, I drove for a lot of years. It took a while to get me out of the truck because I loved the little rumble beneath my butt, right? I mean, and the diesel smoke and all that good happy stuff. And, and of course times changed, but, yeah, so as time went on, of course, I started instructing back in the late '90s. and of course I'm a safety director slash manager, presently and so forth, and and it's all good. One of the hard things I find over the years is, and this is one of my big things that I always tell people. Boy, it sure is amazing how I got to drive. Kind of to your point in the beginning, where you got to drive around the world with a road map and a CB radio and never had an issue. It's like that was it. That was all we had, man. I mean, there was no phone. And just last week, I had a driver, got stuck in a snowbank, went down the street where he wasn't supposed to go down. Couldn't turn around, of course, had to get a tow truck. But followed GPS. Oh yeah, let's let that thing tell us where to go, right? Well, you got eyes. You're also supposed to be looking at the signs as well. So you have to pay attention, no matter, just because it says make a left doesn't mean make a left. And there's so much knowledge out there. And God, I could just go on and on. So I'm enjoying just kind of listening to you guys rattle off some of the some of the stuff. I'm over here shaking my head like, yeah, you got it, you got it. So
Well,
anyways,
hey man, I appreciate you keying up your mic actually, because it's good to talk to an old hand out there that's done this stuff before. I think one of the things that we have to be kind of careful for as we're talking about new drivers in the industry, and even a new day and age for people coming into actually working in this kind of thing. And we see that definitely there's a decline. There's not the fascination with the job anymore. Most of the time when a truck driver starts their career off in trucking, it's because they have a steady income from it. They're not going to, it's fairly recession proof, all of those things, but they don't really take into consideration that a truck driver has an enormous amount of responsibility for the safety of others around them. And, traffic is getting much heavier than it ever has been before. And trucks are comfortable. You can't hear that rumble anymore as much. And so there's a lot of things we have to do that says, you know what, if we don't keep our space, if we don't keep our driving on an island, that's what we call it in principles of defensive driving. If you're driving on an island, then you really can't have anybody touch you. But if you start to force the issue, if you start to kind of say, hey, being there at a certain time is worth the risk. I used to call it the cliff edge. I don't know how many of you guys that teach new drivers this, or even teach anybody this kind of thing. If you've ever walked out on the edge of a tall building or scaffolding or a bluff or something like this, as you approach that cliff edge, almost every single one of us has this feeling of anxiety that happens. Why? We're not going to fall, but we are right at the edge of that cliff. And what I used to tell drivers is that if you will carry that feeling into everything that you do in your trucking career, you will know where the cliff edge is, how to stay behind it, and how to apply just that principle into everything that you're doing so that you stay in this safe, comfortable space in your truck. It's only when things really surprise us is when we have the most amount of problems. Think about it. We don't have a lot of problems from things that don't surprise us. Hey, I knew that was going to happen. I was prepared for it, and I did the right thing to manage through the situation. It's when things come out of nowhere is when we typically have a tough situation. That can even be from, hey, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to make a left there. I didn't see the sign until too late. I didn't realize that the car was there. That car was just right in my blind spot the whole time. All of these things is what we end up dealing with now that we have telematics on the truck. We've got cameras in the truck. We've got sensors all over the place. All of that kind of stuff is supposed to keep us aware of our situations. Let me tell you something. If I was teaching a new driver that had all the telematics on a truck right now, your number one goal is to never have them come on. If you have to have something blinking at you that says that you're too close to another vehicle or another obstacle, then that's you. That's your failure button right there that says, why did you not see that thing before? You had to have some sensor alert you to the fact that you were too close to something. I know that maybe is a little heavy-handed, Bob, but it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? If I've got something on this thing that's alerting me that I'm too close to another vehicle, why did I have to have a buzzer tell me that I'm too close to another vehicle? I should know it before I'm there.
Well, yeah, you know what, and I have to jump in there and agree. And I don't mean to take up your friend's time over here either. So, But yeah, so I'll chime in on it real quick. So I agree. You know, sometimes I think and people have to monitor those. I mean, and any kind of added safety features are good. All right, it's
Oh
like wearing
yeah.
a seat, like it's like wearing a seatbelt. Seatbelt's good for you. All right, but on the other side of that, if you tighten the damn thing too tight, what's going to happen? You're going to be uncomfortable. It's going to cut your circulation off. You know what I'm saying, that right? But
Sure.
so if you know, just because you have all these safety settings, all right, most people and half of them don't understand how to set them or whatever. All right, and they max them out. So what happens now? You got an ungodly amount of video just coming at you, and then everybody's like, "Oh, you got to monitor these. You got to coach the driver. This, that, and the other." All right. And then we get into all these other things with the trucks, the safety features on the truck. Oh, now, God forbid that the truck hits the white line on the right side of the road, and oh, that's going to try to push you back. Wait a minute here. What if the driver intentionally meant to go there because he's trying to avoid an accident on the left side? You know, now the truck just forced you back into that accident. You know what I'm saying? And you know what I'm talking about with all the safety features that are on these trucks nowadays. The manual braking that kicks in. You know, if it thinks you're following too close. What I mean, you know, and a lot of that kicks in from shadows. And all kinds of crazy stuff. It's and not to mention they're talking to you. There's so many added distractions. You know, and here's my big thing with the distractions. Uh, Quit putting all that shit in there. Excuse my language, but you know, I'm gonna be straightforward. You know, I'm all
Well,
about safety, but when you over clutter it, you're causing more of a distraction. So
you know,
I
clutter and distractions are one of those things that I think are important to mention. You know, we talk about texting and driving. Everybody right now that drives any kind of a vehicle should have heard the message that texting and driving is not safe. That's it. I mean, if you haven't heard that message before, then you haven't had a TV on or haven't driven down the road and seen the big sign on the side of the road that says do not text while driving, or you've just ignored everything about the dangers between texting and driving. So to have somebody continue to text and drive, even if you know that that's something that has been proven to be ultimately dangerous, why do you do it? You know, why is it happening? And I will go back to this thing that says we can collect a lot of the things that we do for safety and keeping ourselves in a safe condition just by knowing the cliff edge, just by knowing that as soon as I lose distraction or lose focus, suddenly I am at the mercy of whoever is also not paying attention. We talk about it, Jim. We talk about this in principles of defensive driving a lot. Is that we can go around and drive around right now and just play the game of I wonder what they're thinking right now, or I wonder what they're doing right now, what's on their mind right now. And if the answer to that is probably not me, then I am going to watch them like a hawk because they do not recognize me. They do not know I'm there and they don't care. If we can assume that what they are doing is driving distractedly, then let's prepare ourselves for that and not be distracted right along with them. If your buddies want to jump off the George Washington Bridge, are you going to follow, follow them along? You know, I don't know how many of you guys had heard that from your mom and dad, but it's seriously the way that we have to look at things right now. Why are we joining these people that basically just tiptoe and tap dance on the edge of the cliff all the time? Why would we want to be out there with them? I want them out there as far away from me so that I can watch what they're doing and I can say, that's interesting. What you guys are thinking is appropriate right here. I think it's better to be on my island knowing where everybody else is and assuming that they're distracted. I
Well, that's a
like
great.
this. Somebody's using the tap dancing thing, tap dancing on the edge of the cliff.
That's fantastic. I remember the days where you would call the receiver hoping to get the driver. Hey, can you catch the driver when he delivers here? We need to talk to him. Nowadays, we've gone through that to cell phones to now onboard technology, telematics, cameras. I mean, you name it, right? There's all sorts of things that are in these vehicles. But I think, you know, the bigger picture, and we've talked about this on a couple of the other town halls, is the right message, right? When one of these cameras lights up and there's a conversation, have a conversation with them. You know, being able to get in front of them. You know, are you coaching them? Are you really trying to observe what's going on and trying to really coach those behaviors and get in front of it? So
Yeah, I always like to just ask the drivers, so what was more important than the safety of the vehicle and the safety of other people at that moment? Was
That-
it really, are those things really more important? Is arriving on time more important than getting there safely? And we send a mixed message a lot of times. When we've got a hot load, and I'm on a hot load right now, and I know it's got to get there. And if I know this hot load is got to be there on time, am I taking chances right now based on that being the primary objective? So I'm not saying that we will have hot loads. We will have things that are waiting on the freight to get there. We know that we put demand on drivers to get the job done, to make their deliveries, to be on time. Our customers expect this customer service aspect of everything. And I'm also not saying, because it's not good for the driver either. If you can only drive 350 miles a day, you're not going to make any money that way if you're being paid by the mile. But these loads also get a driver urgently picking up the next one and forcing it to the next thing. We think that we're protecting ourselves with regional dispatches that limit the amount of hours that a driver, or that limit the number of miles that we put on a driver. But a lot of times that's going to force drivers into making other bad decisions on trying to make the money, even if they're not being handed the loads that can make the money. Not saying regional dispatch is a great thing. It gets you home on the weekends, and get you home every day if your dispatch is set up that way. But in that day, if we are trying to do too much and cram a lot into that one day, we have to always be observant of how many chances a driver is going to take, how many choices they have to make, how many times that we have to put them in an awkward position of safety over that dispatch getting realized. And if we're not coming to an understanding that way from a driver's perspective, then a lot of times we set them up for failure.
Oh, for sure. Bob just said the days of running 2 and 3 logbooks. I don't miss those days. When I had a driver of ours, we dispatched out of Massachusetts down here to Florida, and he was home in like 17 hours running 3 logbooks. So I definitely don't miss those days when it comes to that. So I'm going to pose a question to you, big guy. Hey, so you're running from Anderson, Missouri, out to International Falls or New York City last weekend, and there's inclement weather, you got a lot going on. How are you preparing? There's a storm coming in. You got to get this load there Monday. It's Thursday. You're picking up the load now, heading out there. What sort of things are you doing when you're in the truck? How are you prepping for that? Are you planning to stop ahead of it? Are you planning around it? What sort of things would you do when you were making deliveries?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Now, back then you had a lot less forecasting that you could do. Yeah, you knew that if you were driving up to International Falls, Minnesota in the wintertime, it's probably going to snow, or it's probably going to be really cold. It's probably going to be something. So I can prepare myself with, extra food, water in the cab. I can have an extra sleeping bag back there, or warm clothes, so that I'm not facing any kind of an emergency that way. Now we get to forecast a little bit more. So we can look ahead and we can communicate those things. Hey, listen, there's going to be some weather kicking across northern Minnesota, and I'm probably going to stop at Albert Lee before we get up there, see if that storm's going to pass. How are they going to plow the roads? We can communicate with customers better now. We can start to forecast dispatches, how they're going to work for the driver, what the driver's going to do. Here's what you almost have to do as a driver, though. If you have a plan, then do it. You can't be changing the plan midstream, because it's not a plan anymore. You've basically taken the plan for what you're going to do and just tossed it in the air. If you do that, then it's really difficult to plan. So I would advise any driver right now that if you have a plan, stick to the plan. Yeah, you may have to come up with an alternative, part of the way there, but you're planning these things based on good information. And then if you're just taking all of that and throwing it away, because here's going to be old school reference, I don't know any other way to do it, because you decided that it was more important for you to pull in the truck stop and play pinball for 4 hours. Well, the plan is gone now. Everything is different, and now we have to formulate a new plan. It isn't a plan then. It's just an idea about what we might want to do unless we are otherwise distracted. Now, if we're tired, this is also something. Fatigue driving is a huge issue. If you know that you're going on this trip, you mentioned, Anderson, Missouri to New York City. I'm going to have to get some rest for that trip. I know that driving on the East Coast is a little bit more difficult than if I was driving out to the West Coast or if I was driving in areas that are more farmland or something like this. But I'm going to have to prepare myself with good rest, good food, make sure that I'm not tired when I climb in that cab. But if I am, I also need to communicate that I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get that plan done. I might have to have an alternate, a plan B here that I can fall back to in case I get tired or in case something happens. Think about it, guys. Hours of service is designated in the 11, 14-hour rule, the 60, 70-hour rule, the 34-hour restart. All of that figures into the stuff around hours of service. But what is hours of service really there for? It is to prevent one thing and one thing only, and that is fatigue driving. This is why it's ill or fatigued is what those hours of service regulations are all about. And if you don't feel well, and if you don't feel like you can make the run, you can have hours. But you shouldn't be out there driving, and that's also taking care of yourself. How are you prepared? Do you have a good plan in place, and are you ready to execute the plan?
Yeah, I remember back in the day when we were dispatching the emergency exception, and it's not called the emergency exception anymore. It's just the exception to the rule now. When that 14 to 16 hour mark where you could do that twice a week, dispatchers were using that with drivers, and that was a dangerous line when you were working through that. And having a guy start at 1 a.m. and him still be on the road at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you're wondering what the heck is going on. How is he not back at the facility at that point? So it's a slippery slope, and we had a guy get into almost a head-on collision because he was nodding off at the wheel because he was out. So fatigue driving is definitely a thing. If you're not paying attention to it and you're not following the rules, it will catch up to you.
Weather is a huge impact on fatigue driving as well. You might think that the stresses that happen with drivers, they may think, yeah, I just got 10 hours of sleep. They're on the road for a couple of hours and they're just exhausted again. Maybe there was an anxiety in their sleep. Maybe there was something that says that their sleep wasn't as restful as they possibly could get. But a driver is then going to think, well, I can't pull over. I'm going to disappoint people. Maybe it's I'm going to disappoint people. I'm going to get in trouble. I'm not going to get that second load whenever I drop this one off. I need to be ready to pick up the next one. I think that trip planning anymore, especially with ELDs and with the monitoring that's going on and everything, one thing that I've always advised new drivers when they get into the industry is when you drop your load off, have hours. Don't drop it off with only like 10 minutes to spare before you're out of hours again. Why? Because when you drop that load off or when you unload, you need to be loaded again. If you're an over-the-road truck driver and you're not loaded, you're not making money. So if I can pull in and know that I got my rest before, I know I'm going to have about 3 hours left after I do the drop and hook, I can call into my dispatcher and I can say, yeah, I got 3 hours. Where do you need me to go to pick up the next one? Rest when you're loaded, not when you're empty. And those kind of little tips that we can give even new drivers how to actually do better business practices within their own business is really important to get them feeling a little more like they own it too, right? If you feel like you're a steering wheel holder and you're just driving until you're told to stop, you have a lot less of a sense of ownership of the practice of being a professional driver. And I think that it's something that can be taught. You can teach drivers how to have that mindset for what they're about to do. Yes, I'm the most prepared person here. Tell a quick story if you don't mind. I was in Buffalo, New York, and we had about 7 of our trucks all pulled into the same place. And I was the only one with hours after we got unloaded there. So we were in Buffalo. There was one load coming back to the Midwest that was in Erie, Pennsylvania, and I had hours that I could pick it up. I was the sixth one in line for dispatch, but I was the only one with hours. So I walked into this before the telematics and before the cell phones and everything. So I walked in the truck stop. I sat down there. I called in empty, and the dispatcher said, "Do you have hours?" And I said, "Yeah, I've got hours. Do you think you could make it to Erie?" "Yeah, I've got hours to make it down to Erie." He said, "Don't say a word. Just hang up the phone, walk back to your truck, and go to this address," because he was so afraid that anybody there that was before me, I scooted it to the front of the line there because I was the only one with hours that could pick up that next load. I was the only one that got out of there. And guess what? Lake effect snowstorm hit Buffalo on that same trip, and I was the only one that made it out of that. The rest of them were stuck there for 2 or 3 days. There's a moral of the story. If you are going in prepared to do the next thing, then be prepared to do the next thing, do the next thing right, and eventually you just start to do things right.
That's a great call. It's a great great lesson. Lots of great lessons we've learned in our transportation careers, haven't we, buddy?
I believe so, sir. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I certainly appreciate the conversation. As always, as always, these town halls are brought to us by Principles of Defensive Driving. You want to talk a little bit about Principles of Defensive Driving and the different aspects and what this has done for not only you but our team as well?
Yeah, I'll tell you, Jim. It's one of those things that that teaches behaviors more than the what, and I think that's what makes this program unique. I can tell you that after delivering this to hundreds of clients right now that use our Principles of Defensive Driving program, they've all come back and they've kind of said the same thing. Teaching behaviors, teaching what to look for and how to apply to it is so much better than teaching just, 5 what not to do's or whatever it is. Repeated mantras don't work as well as actually looking at see, decide, and act, and then putting ourselves into different situations where those things apply. It's about preparing your drivers to be able to go out there and have that safety cushion around their vehicle at all times. How they can predict by asking questions about what other vehicles are doing, so that they know that they're in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. When everybody else is losing their mind, if you are not losing your mind, you're the leader in that situation. And I think it empowers drivers to be more professional, to make better plans, and to do things the right way in their careers.
Oh, great call out, partner. I think Herbert turned his mic on. Herbert, did you want to add anything? Oh,
Sorry, I had my mic unmuted, so sorry about that.
no
That's
worries.
all
I just didn't know
right.
if you wanted to, yeah, we like to talk. We like to have conversations with everybody. It's much different than our normal formats here at Keller. So we enjoy the banter. So we appreciate it.
Great.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Well, as Brandon stated, we've got a program there that helps us predict behaviors, teaches your drivers to think differently, work through the right questions, asking themselves the same questions over and over to be able to see that. So if you have any sort of interest in any of this, a free training needs assessment, we have 10% off of our initial Principles of Defensive Driving contract. So if you're interested in it, reach out to your sales rep or reach out to one of us. We'll be around. Our next town hall will be March. I can't believe it's getting March already. So we're going to be talking about a Q1 roundup and a bunch of different topics that we've covered in the first quarter. So if anybody has any ideas that they'd like us to talk about, we're all ears and we'd love to hear from you. So feel free to reach out and send us an email. It's our first letter with our last name at jjkeller.com if you're trying to reach out to us. So, but we appreciate everybody jumping on today's call. Thank you for your time. And Brandon, thank you so much for your insight with everything.
Jim, appreciate you so much. I'm going to give a call out also. I'm going to be at our corporate office next week in Neenah, Wisconsin. I'll be presenting hours of service for a certified transportation regulatory expert program that we have right now. I think we've got about 25 people signed up for that certification. I'm really excited to to talk about hours of service with this group. And if you want to learn more about that, Janice, I think you could probably throw something in the chat if they want to learn more about that new program that we have called Certified Transportation Regulatory Expert. It's a 5 days in Neenah. I'll tell you what, if you don't like 5 days in Neenah, Wisconsin, I don't know what's wrong with you.
Come in June or September.
That's right. June is going to be the next class. So March is filled up, but definitely reach out for more information on that.
Yeah, and I was just chiming in here to say that I did put the link to the next town hall, and then if you want to watch the past sessions, but I will also include that CTRE link. We've got June and September, which are much lovelier times in Wisconsin. There's a reason I'm in Arizona today, so instead of Wisconsin. So
CTRE is a wonderful program. I went through the pilot in November.
Well, you're certified now. Yeah.
I am certified CTRE. It is a great program. I knew a lot about the regs, but I still learned a ton. So being able to get into that book, and like I stated earlier, the interpretations, I don't think people realize that there's so many interpretations to the rules. So being able to understand that like an expert, it is a great program. It is definitely worth its weight in gold. So
reach out for more information about it. We'd love to hear from you too. If you're on this call, if you know anybody else that might want to sit in and listen to a couple of old hands banter back and forth about regulations, about safety and attitude and all of those kind of things, it's important stuff. So we're glad that you're here. I'm awful glad to be a part of this. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Janice.
Thank you all for jumping on our February town hall. We really appreciate you spending an hour's time with us. Thank you so much for your time. And we hope to see you again.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Yep, we look forward to seeing
the
you all in
ditches,
March.
buddy.
Take care.
Hey, just remember what Porky Pig always said. That's all, folks.
I think that's a good way to sign off, everybody. Thanks, everybody. Have a great time.
All right, guys.
Take
Have a
care.
great one.
Bye.
Cheers, all.
You too. Thanks.